There are two kinds of silence in a case like this. The silence of a girl who never got the chance to speak again, and the silence of a system that refuses to answer for why. Heather Dawn Church vanished from her home in 1991. A 13-year-old doing her homework, no forced entry, no blood, no struggle, just gone. The investigation was sloppy, misguided, defensive. The family was scrutinized, the public was pacified, and for 2 years, the El Paso County Sheriff's Office failed to ask the right questions, or worse, failed to care that they hadn't. But not everyone looked away. John Anderson had seen what real investigation looked like with his time with the Colorado Springs Police Department. He knew that justice was what justice was supposed to mean. And when he saw how Heather's case had been mishandled, he didn't write an op-ed. He didn't send an angry letter. He filed the paperwork and he ran for sheriff. Because sometimes the only way to change a system is to take it over. This wasn't a political stunt. It was personal. It was righteous. And it was risky. Anderson wasn't promising power. He was demanding responsibility. He knew that the department had become slow to act, slow to admit failure, and fast to protect its own image. And the voters listened. When Anderson won the election in 1994, he didn't just take the badge. He took on every cold case that had been left to rot, including Heather's. And to do it right, he'd need help from someone who knew what to do with silence. Someone who didn't fear it. Someone who had a habit of turning cold cases hot. That man's name was Lou Smith. In this episode, we'll look at who John Anderson was before the campaign, what drove him to run, and how his win shifted the course of justice in El Paso County. Because sometimes the difference between a forgotten case and a solved one is just one man who refuses to let go. This is Dark Dialogue, and this is The Forest Kept Her Silence. So Angela, how's it going tonight?
That's all right. How are you?
I'm good. I can't complain.
Well, we could complain. People don't want to hear it, but we could.
I'm drugged up on pain pills.
I'm a little drugged up too. Maybe this episode will be fun.
It could get interesting.
Did you get hurt again in therapy or something?
Oh, my shoulder's shot.
Oh.
They need to cut it off. I'm tired of it. But the last episode, we talked about the night that Heather vanished, just 13 years old. And by the time her mom came home, she was gone. And for 2 years, law enforcement had no answers or maybe no real interest in finding them.
Yeah, and it gets really old really fast when they just decide, nah.
I know, it just pisses me off. Every time I research a case,
I couldn't tell.
It just pisses me right the hell off.
I really couldn't tell.
And then you've got, on the other side of the coin, you've got some really stand-up cops that, you know, that deserve all the kudos in the room or in the world. We have both of those in this case.
Right.
We've got the pieces of shit that are pieces of shit, and then we've got some really stand-up investigators and law enforcement that took it freaking serious. And I mean, it's just the difference between the two. It's just amazing.
Well, I'm glad we have both at least.
Yeah, me too. So welcome back to Dark Dialogue, listeners, the podcast where we unravel the shadows of the human mind and dive deep into the mysteries that haunt small towns and big cities alike. I'm your host, John.
And I'm Angela, and together we shine a light on the stories that keep us up at night, unsolved disappearances, lives stolen too soon, and the questions that refuse to be buried.
In this episode, we shift focus a little bit from the silence that followed Heather's disappearance to the man who refused to accept it. John Anderson wasn't sheriff when Heather vanished. He was working with the Colorado Springs Police Department, watching in disbelief as the sheriff's department failed a child and her family.
And instead of just talking about it, which most would do, He ran for sheriff on a campaign built not on politics but purpose.
So tonight we'll walk through Anderson's background, the culture of the El Paso County Sheriff's Office before he stepped in, and how his election in '94 marked the beginning of a real investigation, one that was focused on accountability, cold cases, and justice.
Just a quick note, if you believe stories like Heather's deserve more than silence, take a second to hit follow, give us a thumbs up, rate the show. Whatever platform you're on, your support does help us bring these cases to light.
So this isn't just about what happened. It's about who was willing to fight for the truth. This is Dark Dialogue. The forest kept her silence. So I think the first thing that we need to do is kind of catch up with the Church family. When we left them last episode, Heather's body had just been found. And, we went through that whole period of time. And so from 1991, when she was kidnapped in September of 91, and then her body wasn't found until 94. Okay. So during that time, they formed the Friends of Heather Dawn Church Foundation, and they did that to raise awareness, to do some fundraising. They were distributing flyers, billboards with Heather's photo on them. They tied yellow ribbons on trees near their home. And Diane sought counseling for her and for her kids. And, then Mike, you think of, if you've ever gone through divorce, it's a freaking nightmare. And luckily, I don't know what it's like to lose a child or have a child disappear, get kidnapped, but it's, 100,000 times worse than divorce.
Yeah.
This poor couple is going through a divorce while going through losing a child. I honestly cannot even imagine. And what often gets forgotten in these cases is they got 3 other kids, and it's so tragic that they lost Heather. In any case where a child is killed or a child is taken, you run into this, and it's tragic that their sibling is gone, but it's also tragic because in a lot of senses, they lose their childhood. It's not just the happy, normal childhood that other kids experience. It's a totally different beast.
Well, and they lose their identities too.
Yeah, they do, because now they're the sibling of the girl that got kidnapped, or they're the sibling of the boy that got murdered, or whatever it looks like.
Well, and they're the kids left behind in the parents. Like, they don't feel, most of the time, it's not that way, but there's a lot of cases where they just feel like they don't matter to their parents anymore because all they think about.
What is really interesting to me is outside of Carrie Stainer, you don't see these kids causing problems.
Yeah.
Really? Of course.
Yeah, Carrie Stainer did enough for everybody.
Yeah. And of course, I can't make a global statement. I don't know every case, but the vast majority of these cases, when you catch up with the siblings later on, a lot of the time, they're still fighting the siblings' battle. It's not like they resent it. They kind of pick up the torch and run with it. It's kind of fascinating, because you see that with, like the Maura Murray case. Her sister Julie has taken over from Fred the dad and has kind of taken that. Morgan, Heather Elvis's sister, she's not out there like Julie is, but she definitely has been out there in the public eye and talking. And, Allison, who was Lauren Agee's sister. It's amazing to me that even though they have every right to feel some resentment and some jealousy because
they find
their sibling does kind of take the spotlight the vast majority of them don't seem to do that. They seem to get involved and help. And so it's amazing, and it's sad for them, but it's amazing how they work their way through it. Obviously, I don't think that necessarily applies to these 3 boys, Christoph, Gunnar, and Sage. I haven't heard anything about them. I don't know where they're at. And you know my rule. I don't really try to find them. I don't really research because it's none of my freaking business.
If they're not out there, they don't want to be.
Exactly. Yep. And Heather's case did appear on America's Most Wanted. No surprise there. Anytime a kid goes missing, John Walsh is like the first one at the door, the first one on the phone trying to help the parents. And so he's pretty freaking amazing. And then obviously the family was still, reaching out to the sheriff's office, hoping for some answers, hoping for some progress in the case, hoping for something. And then once I alluded to it a little bit on the last episode, but the sheriff's department zeroed in on Mike right away and kind of decided that he was the guilty one. And so not only do you have, and this happens so often and for good reason, a lot of the times the parent is guilty, but so many times these parents are not only going through the loss of a child, they're also going through accusations that they're the ones that are guilty for making it happen, which in some cases, like I said, I understand. In this case, I don't know. It's a little bit of a reach to me. Like the idea that the dad is going to come kidnap his daughter and leave his 5-year-old son in the crib. I mean, I don't know. So much about this just seems so much more like a stranger abduction than a family member to me. That is not where I obviously I have the benefit of knowing the end result, but walking into that, I don't think that's where my mind would go. His dad did it.
Right. Because there's like you said, there's the other kids. Why not them too?
Why not them too? And why go through this nonsense? He's got visitation with them. Why are you going to go out there and kidnap them? It doesn't freaking fit. But it didn't matter to the sheriff's department because that's who they zeroed in on. And, so it puts that family through, they're being victimized a second time.
Well, yeah.
Is really what it comes down to, And so then that brings us to John Wesley Anderson, who we talked about quite a bit, last week as well. And I kind of went into a little bit of his background and everything. So he started with the Colorado Springs Police Department as a kid. He started when he wasn't old enough to be a cop. He went into the cadet program when he was
kind of like ROTC for the Army, but
kind of similar. So during that period of time, he would work in the police department and do like filing and stuff like that.
That's kind of cool.
And help out. So, and the kind of really cool thing about it is it allows him to meet a lot of the detectives and a lot of the officers and stuff like that. And, kind of get a foothold in that department. And then once he completed that and he was old enough to then, become an officer,
right?
Then he did that. And then, like I said, he worked, he did just like everybody else in the police force does, except for, like Deputy Dipshit in the Foreign Agents
case. Any of the other cases?
Jeremy Taylor, that piece of shit. Well, he went from working on Grandpa's roof to being a freaking homicide detective overnight.
Yeah.
But usually it kind of follows the path of John Anderson, where they start out in patrol or maybe in the jail and then move to patrol and then they rank up, so they're a patrol deputy, and then maybe if they're lucky, they get some rank, and then maybe they make sergeant one day, and then they're kind of running other patrol deputies, and then if they pass the detective's exam and everything, then maybe they can become a detective, and it's a slow process.
Yeah.
And, it's meant to make sure that the detectives are kind of the cream of the crop, best of the best. And I do think that Colorado Springs was really good at that. I mean, shit, when we've got 3 nationally recognized detectives coming out of the same time period in the same department.
Yeah.
That's pretty freaking nuts. And so
It kind of tells me that other police departments should be doing the same protocols, letting like high schoolers decide and do some things, and we'd probably have some better cops if.
Yep.
Yeah.
And, you know, when these departments like Colorado Springs offer help to smaller departments, maybe the smaller departments ought to just swallow their pride and take it.
Yeah. And learn.
Yeah. Because I know, like, during the John Benet Ramsey case, it wasn't Colorado Springs, although Lou Smith did work on that, but he was retired at the time. But Denver.
Yeah. You have to come out of retirement to help people because they're not doing well.
Yeah. But Denver offered Boulder 2 of their homicide detectives, and Boulder declined. We're talking about Boulder that had 1 homicide that whole year, declining 2 homicide detectives from Denver who probably run 1 a day.
Yeah.
I mean,
sadly,
Denver homicide detectives know their shit because they work a lot of homicides.
Sadly.
Yeah. And so, and, you know, Colorado Springs is the same way. You know, you've got, like I said last week, I think Joe Kinda had over 300 homicide investigations. Lou Smith had over 200. I mean, that's a shit ton of murders.
Yes, it is.
So it's just crazy. And that's,
and in what, 20 years of their
probably,
general?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know for sure when Lou Smith started, but in most law enforcement is eligible for retirement after 20 years. So I imagine that Lou probably got full retirement from the Colorado Springs Police Department and then transferred to chief of detectives on the sheriff's department. And then he worked there for a little bit with John Anderson before retiring so he could go to Boulder and work on John Benet Ramsey's freaking case.
Right.
Which he was working until he died.
Wow.
Literally. Like one of his last words before he passed was, "Soon I'll know who killed John Benet."
Yeah. That's
so,
sucks.
I mean, he lived it and breathed it. So, but John Anderson, you know, like I said last week, when he wanted to become a detective, he went and talked to Lou and said, you know, what can I do? How can I? And Lou said, get a degree, go to college. And, you know, none of those old detectives had a college degree. He's like, what the hell? But Lou Smith recognized that things were changing and a degree was going to be important. So he did. While working, he was working on his degree and everything, which he got.
Busy guy.
He became a court-qualified expert in forensics, including bloodstain pattern analysis, crime scene reconstruction. He taught criminal investigation courses at the college and at the police academy.
Jeez, did he sleep?
No, I don't think he freaking slept very damn much.
I don't think so either.
No. And so, I mean, he was really freaking busy. And you know, like I said, Joe Kinda was his sergeant. So Joe Kinda was actually over John Anderson when Anderson was a detective.
Okay.
But, you know, he had a
cool teacher too.
Joe Kinda and Lou Smith.
Come on. Yeah.
Well, and another cool thing is I think it was when he made sergeant. I'm pretty sure it was when John Anderson made sergeant that kind of a tradition is you ask somebody to pin your sergeant's badge on you. And he asked Lou Smith, and then Lou pinned his own sergeant badge on him because he had already ranked up. And so he gave his sergeant badge.
That's cool.
And which is kind of tradition, but not everybody
pass the torch.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's kind of a special tradition that's reserved for kind of special relationships. And then, you know, when I was reading about Anderson, I kind of had to laugh a little bit because he said that Lou Smith was the only one that got away with calling him Johnny. But Lou called him Johnny. And it's funny because my name is John. On my birth certificate, it's John. It's not Jonathan. It's not Johnny. So I can understand it just grates on your nerves. But if there's like one person that it's like a term of endearment kind of, and you're like, okay, I'm cool with that, but everybody else not cool with it.
Exactly.
So, and that's
I have
kind
that
of
too.
Yeah, and that's kind of the relationship that they had. And I talked about it last week that John was looking from the outside and he was seeing the way that this investigation was going, and he really felt like he could get it solved. And so that was really the determining factor. He wanted to run for El Paso County Sheriff, but he didn't necessarily want to run then. I think he wanted to put a few more years in with the Colorado Springs Police Department, and then when he was getting ready to retire or getting up there, then run for sheriff kind of at the end of his career.
Right.
But the Heather Dawn Church case really spurred him to move a lot quicker than I think that he would have wanted to.
Push the gas a little bit.
Yes. So a few things with the case that he was just beside himself about. And I got to imagine, obviously I did not read this anywhere, so I don't know for sure. But I got to imagine that probably Lou Smith, Joe Kinda, probably the whole bunch of Colorado Springs detectives were like, what is up with these clowns? And of course, they're not going to talk shit about, another department in the public eye. But I can guarantee behind closed doors, they were like, what are these guys, freaking stupid or what?
Yeah.
Because they completely mishandled the scene. And, I think I said last week, but I'll definitely explain this week that they did notice a screen in the master bedroom window was not put in correctly. And so they pulled fingerprints and they did submit those fingerprints, but it didn't come back to any kind of a match. And then they didn't secure the scene. They let friends and family members wander all around the house. So obviously that risks losing evidence.
Yeah.
There was no systematic forensic sweep, no trace evidence collection. There was an absolute lack of urgency. Like we talked about, last week. First of all, they told them, no, we're not, she's got to be missing for so long. We're not going to.
Yeah.
It wasn't until Diane called back multiple times that finally they sent a deputy, just one.
Yeah.
And they treated it as a runaway, not an abduction. There was no extensive nighttime searches. And they absolutely ignored the FBI kidnapping protocols. And we talked about last week that the investigative unit for the El Paso County Sheriff's Office was understaffed, underfunded. And Sheriff Barry was, his department was an absolute mess. It kind of reminds me of Canyon City's in the Candace Hiltz case.
Yeah.
When there was just scandal after scandal, and it was a freaking nightmare. And you can't get cases solved in an environment like that,
Well, and they don't want to. They just want to continue their BS-ery.
Yeah, and I think that Anderson was seeing all of this crap going on. Other cases outside of Heather's, it's just there was no urgency on the part of the investigative side, or it actually doesn't sound like any part of the sheriff's office. Then you had like deputies getting busted for DUI, for excessive force. We had that 89 internal probe on favoritism, which I talked about on the last episode. Public distrust was high. The department was underfunded significantly. And there was a 97 Palmer Lake murder, a 1990 child abduction, and both of those were openly and obviously mishandled. And Barry's leadership was defensive and patrol focused. He resisted any kind of help from external agencies like the FBI or anything like that. Absolutely against it. His department could handle everything, which is an insane approach because I don't give a shit how big of a department you are. When you're working certain cases, the FBI has resources that could be at your disposal if you just ask. And, you know, I realize
the most resources, don't they?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
You know, it is case dependent. If you're working a robbery, for instance, you're probably not going to call the FBI in. But if you're working murder, and I think a lot of even sheriffs and stuff have this misconception, but I know a lot of the public does, that when a department reaches out to the FBI, then the FBI just comes in and completely takes over. But that's not how it works. They offer a certain amount of help, and that might be FBI agents on the ground, but it might just be lab. I mean, they have a cutting edge lab that can process all kinds of forensic evidence that, you know, smaller state labs either just aren't equipped to handle, or they can't handle it as fast as what is necessary. So there's all kinds of resources that the FBI can offer short of taking over your investigation. And the fact of the matter is, unless it's their jurisdiction, which would be kidnapping cases, especially if a victim is taken across state lines, you know,
hence the federal and
bank robbery. You know, there's certain things that become FBI jurisdiction, in which case they can just come in and take over because it's their case.
But they're generally not just sitting in a room waiting for somebody to say, we need help. Oh, we'll go take this case. They're not doing
and they don't take over.
They're
even
busy.
If they do. If it's like a murder case, they'll offer help, you know, maybe some profiling assistance and that kind of stuff, but they can't take over. But it didn't matter to Barry. He wasn't interested in asking them for any help.
It's ridiculous. God complex.
Yeah. And so Anderson's role for sheriff, he envisioned completely transforming the El Paso County Sheriff's Department into a professional, investigative focused agency. One of his top goals was to solve Heather's case, period. He wanted to increase salaries, training to attract more skilled deputies. He wanted to implement digital communications, volunteer programs, restore the public trust through transparency and victim support, hire experts to tackle any stalled probes. He wanted to open a cold case unit and hand the reins over to Lou Smith. And so that was really kind of where he was geared to. And they're talking about, you know, I've kind of talked already a little bit about Sheriff Barry, but obviously I didn't know the guy. I don't know. But what was happening in his department, it just doesn't seem like he was a very good sheriff. It's his leadership style is described as being authoritarian and insular. So he promoted based on loyalty to him and favoritism rather than use any kind of a merit program. And his big focus was patrol operations, traffic enforcement, a visible presence in the public, and he kind of ignored the investigative side of things, which frankly, if I had to pick one or the other, I'd have to pick investigative over the patrol.
Yeah.
Really, you want a department that's giving global support to all of those areas, but I'd rather have serious cases solved than jaywalkers got.
Right.
You know? And then he was said to have had poor crisis management, as was seen in the Heather Don Church case. And so then when you start reading about the culture that was there, it was really a good old boy network. His buddies and shit moved up. The ones that kissed his ass were promoted, and those that didn't were either pushed completely out or transferred into areas where they would be freaking miserable or just out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
You know, I mentioned that 1989 probe. It was an internal probe that exposed the nepotism in promotions, deputy loyalty tied to Barry's reelection efforts rather than to the mission. I mean, it seems like really you had a department of people that were loyal to him no matter what. No,
Right.
and so it wouldn't have mattered if he would have done good or bad. They were supporting
Right.
him because pretty much they freaking had to, or they'd lose their job. He would have them run out or whatever. So,
That's disgusting. I hate that.
well, especially in something like law enforcement.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe basket weaving. I mean, that kind of stuff isn't really acceptable no matter what industry you're in. But if you're talking about a basket weaving freaking company or something, then, if we don't have the best basket weaver in the whole wide world weaving baskets, it's probably not that big of a
Dad
deal.
blasted anyhow.
But when you're talking about paramedics, firemen, investigators, I want the freaking best that there is in those roles.
Yeah.
I don't give a shit who they know, and I don't give a shit if you like them or not. I want the ones that can freaking run a pump truck, that can go into a burning home, that know what meds to freaking deliver for this or that, that can go to a homicide scene and figure out who the freaking killer is. I could give a shit if you like them or not. I want them good.
It's almost better if you don't like them.
Yeah, they can be asshats.
Yeah.
You don't have to go to their freaking house for Thanksgiving or their barbecue for the 4th of July, but if they're good at their job, who gives a shit about all the rest of it?
If they're good at their job, they don't have time to have a barbecue on the 4th of July.
This is probably true.
You need to invite them to your house so they can eat and run.
That's probably exactly true. Yep. So, this is what John Anderson essentially was running against. And it wasn't much. But, in these smaller towns especially, how well somebody is known counts a tremendous amount in an election. So, if Sheriff Barry in his good old boy network extended out into the community and stuff, you don't know how that's going to turn out, because I've seen that in my own life where you have a total piece of shit that just keeps getting reelected and keeps getting reelected because of name recognition. And, I found it kind of comical when I was reading his book and he was describing how he had a press conference to announce that he was running for sheriff. I'm talking about John Anderson.
Okay.
And nobody showed up.
Oh.
And then there was like this one dude that showed up and asked if he could take one of the little pamphlets that Anderson had put together. And so he's like, oh yeah, sure. And he got him all set up with his little pamphlets and stuff. We'll come to find out the dude was a spy for Barry's campaign. So,
oh, geez.
The only ones that showed up to his announcement were like Lou Smith and a spy from the other campaign.
Wonderful.
So, yeah, I found that kind of comical. But,
it didn't work. So there.
Yeah, he ran a good campaign. And then when it all shook out, he was elected. He beat out Barry for that position, and he was elected. And then, like I mentioned last week, when he very first decided to run for sheriff, he approached Lou Smith and said, if I win, I'm going to need you to come in and be my chief of detectives, which Lou said, okay, I will.
Nice.
And so once Anderson won the election, then it was time to immediately, once he was sworn in and took office and everything, then it was time to start making some changes. And one of those big ones was to bring Lou Smith in as his chief of detectives. And so for those of you that don't know or haven't heard of Lou Smith, where he really became, I would say, famous, at least in the true crime community, is with the JonBenet Ramsey case. So the JonBenet Ramsey case obviously came 5 years after the Heather Dawn Church kidnapping. And by that time, Lou had retired from his position under Anderson. And
I know that's not relevant, but every time you say JonBenet Ramsey, I feel like it was the 80s for some reason. And I know that it wasn't, but it feels like one of the oldest cases in the book.
I understand. Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you. It does feel a lot older than it actually was. You know, it was 1996.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the year I graduated high school 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just feels so much older than that.
It does. But I mean, 30 years was a long
I know. I don't remind me. We're not old yet.
You know, I bring that up not because we're covering the John Benet Ramsey case, at least not right now. We will be at some point. We'll cover that case. But I bring it up because it kind of encapsulates, I think, who Lou Smith was. So Lou was brought in by the district attorney. And at that time, like I said, Lou had retired and his wife had been diagnosed with cancer. He went up to Boulder thinking that it was going to be like a week-long deal, maybe a weekend, just a couple days.
Right.
That Patsy was guilty. He was going to go up there and show what happened, and then he was going to be back to his sick wife. And as we know,
spoiler alert,
that is not at all how it turned out.
Yeah.
During his investigation of the John Benet Ramsey case, Lou became convinced that it was an intruder and that the family had nothing to do with it, which really went against what the Boulder Police Department was saying about the case. And then, so Lou continued to work on it. His videos are available to all of those who have a lot of time and don't fall asleep during shows because, damn, it's dry and boring. But I've watched all of them, and Lou tours John Benet Ramsey's house, the Ramsey home, and describes everything.
Well, yeah, because they'll need to know later.
This is the front of the house. And so it's very, very dry. And he didn't do it for the public to ever see. He did it for his own reference in the investigation. So it's not like he's trying to be entertaining. But
he needs something to fall back on when he has questions.
If you want to understand the layout of that house, there's nothing better to do it because he literally walks you through every inch of that house. I think it's 6 hours.
Jeez.
All in. I think there's 6 hours of video.
Wow.
And so that is the kind of meticulous investigator that Lou Smith was. He went in, and then he's famous because the detectives, the Boulder police detectives, there was the window that was broken that was left open.
Oh, yeah.
And the Boulder police said that a person couldn't get through that window. Lou Smith's famous for throwing on coveralls and jumping down. And I think he was in his 60s or 70s at that point. I think he was in his 70s by that point. He jumps into the window well and crawls through this freaking window like it's nothing. And so pretty much made the Boulder investigators look like a bunch of dipshits. And then, but they fought to have him barred from the grand jury. And he fought to be able to testify in front of the grand jury. And it's a weird case that not a lot of people ever heard about because somebody with the district attorney's office tried to sue him to have him destroy all of his notes and everything from the investigation, which is absurd.
Yeah.
I guess I should mention that he ended up resigning as soon as he figured out what was going on, and that the decision had pretty much been made that they were going to prosecute the Ramseys no matter what. Then he resigned and said, I can't be a part of maliciously prosecuting somebody that I know is innocent. So he resigned and then wanted to testify. And that's when somebody from the district attorney's office tried to make him burn all his notes and shit. So he ends up going to the prosecuting attorney in Colorado Springs, who with another lawyer took his case, which you just never hear about. Like one district attorney in one county suing. another one. So it was a big shitstorm, but as it all turned out, Lou was allowed to go ahead and testify. And as we know now, it didn't do a hell of a lot of good because they did return true bills of indictment against John and Patsy Ramsey, although we wouldn't know that for 20 some odd years.
Right.
When that was finally released. And then unfortunately, during his time spent working on John Bonet's case, his wife passed away from cancer.
Oh.
And so following that, he continued to work the case. And I think I said it last time, but I'll say it again just because I think it really goes to show what a stand-up guy he is, in that when he was working on the Ramsey case, John Ramsey tried to buy him an ice cream cone. And Lou Smith said, no, because I don't want anybody saying that I'm being paid by you. So he wouldn't even let him buy an ice cream cone. And he took all kinds of flack because he prayed with the Ramseys. And so he took a bunch of shit for that. But Lou Smith was a devout Christian. And the first thing he would do every time he pulled up to a crime scene is, before he'd even go into the crime scene, he'd sit in his car and say a prayer for the victim. That was just who he was. Whether you agree with it or don't agree with it, it doesn't mean that when he prayed with the Ramseys, it doesn't mean he was on their side. It just means that it was two Christians that share that whole thing.
Yeah.
You know? And so he continued on, and he built this amazing freaking spreadsheet that listed all of the victims. And then when he was on his deathbed, because then he ended up getting cancer, and when he was on his deathbed, he was meeting with John Anderson, and basically him and John Anderson, and there was a couple other investigators, and then Lou's children were all involved. So it wasn't just John Anderson. There was a few different people that Lou was essentially passing on this investigation to, because he wanted it to continue after he had died.
Right.
And so, he...
With good people.
With good people. Yeah. And they're still today working through Lou's spreadsheet. There's a team of them, and they're going...
How big was this?
It was over 1,000 names, I think.
Bloody hell.
And they're having to go find these people and secure their DNA, either through consent, when they'll go talk to them, they'll let them take it, or they're digging through their garbages and shit, trying to get their DNA to match. And so this team, which includes at least Lou's daughter, John Anderson, and 3 or 4 other people, are still working this every day, still to this day. And so, Anderson, that tells you a lot about his own character, because I don't think that was necessarily what he wanted to spend his retirement doing.
No.
But he promised Lou Smith, his good friend, that's what he would be doing. And so, these two worked together, but they were friends too. Really good friends. John Anderson ended up getting married later in life. I think he'd been divorced and then he remarried later. Lou Smith was his best man.
Aw.
Lou Smith bought the limo to come and pick him and his new wife. I mean, they were like buddies.
I like those kind of stories.
And so John Anderson then took that torch and has carried it for 30 freaking years. I mean, Lou didn't die in 96, but for, 25 years, whatever. I think
a massive chunk of years.
Yeah, because Lou died in 2010. So we're 15 years now that it's been in John Anderson's lap. And so, so it's kind of funny because Lou became a detective, or Lou joined the Colorado Springs Police Department in 1966. And I think he had to get a waiver because he was too small. He was like a little bitty shit. He was 5 foot nothing and weighed like nothing. And so, he had to go through some shit because he was too little. I think they had to be I can't remember, like 5'10" or something. And he didn't meet the minimum height requirement or the weight requirement.
He wasn't tall enough to ride this ride?
Nope. But he was able to, he was able to get on the case or onto the department and then became a freaking legendary investigator.
Can you imagine if they wouldn't have let him?
What we would have lost.
Yeah.
And so I know that this is a little bit different than how we usually spend our episodes, but I really wanted to take a couple episodes and discuss these investigators and what was going on behind the scenes, because I think it's really important. First of all, for the true crime community, these are a couple investigators that I think you need to know. If you like true crime,
right,
you need to know about these guys.
Let's credit where credit is due. You finally get to praise some investigators.
Exactly.
So you might as well do it.
And because of the impact that it's going to have, which this will be the last episode like this one. Next episode, we're going to be diving into the investigation, the actual investigation, not the waste of time for over 3 years that happened between the time that, 94. So 3 years between the time that she was kidnapped and her body was found and when John Anderson finally became sheriff. Then shit turned around quick. And when Lou finally retired from the El Paso County Sheriff's Office, which wasn't, I think he only worked there for a couple of years and kind of got everything laid out, got the cases solved that he wanted to solve and that he was tasked to solve, and set everything up for success. And then he went ahead and retired.
Gotcha.
And when he left, his solve rate was like 110%. Because he solved 100% of the cases that they took on, plus cold cases that had been left unsolved. And so by the time he retired, he had better than 100% solve rate.
Dang.
Which is
insane
and impressive as all hell.
Yeah, we should invite him over for a barbecue.
Please, Dad.
I know. Figuratively,
you're gonna have to get one of your
John
mediums or something to send that invite.
Yes.
But it is kind of cool because
sometimes
he told John Anderson, I think I said this last week too, I just repeat myself over and over again, but he told John Anderson that, he was going to die. He was going to know who killed John Bonet. And if he could, he would find a way to come back and tell John Anderson who it was.
I really wish he could.
Yeah, me too.
We all need to know.
That case has plagued the world for 30 years now.
Yeah. Feels like 50.
But so much like Breonna Maitland's case, that case was so mishandled, I don't know if it'll ever be solved. I think it could have easily been solved. I think it was very solvable, but there was such a mess made of it that I don't know that it'll ever be solved.
I know, that hurts too.
It really sucks. It really sucks. Sometimes it only takes one election to change the direction of a case. One man stepping forward when everyone else has stepped aside. John Anderson didn't run for sheriff because he wanted a title. He didn't need the power. He already had the retirement clock, the resume, the long career behind him. But what he didn't have, what he couldn't shake, was the image of a young girl gone from her home and the justice system that barely noticed. So he ran, and the people listened. When John Anderson took office in January of 1995, he didn't just bring a new badge. He brought a mandate to clean up a department that had lost its edge, lost its urgency, and lost the trust of its community. He started with the internal culture, accountability, transparency, real consequences for failure. And he made one thing clear: cold cases weren't going to be political liabilities anymore. They were going to be priorities. But Anderson also knew that he could not do it alone. If Heather's case was going to be reopened and solved, it needed more than pressure. It needed precision. It needed someone with the skill, the patience, and the instincts to sift through the debris left by years of negligence and find the one detail that mattered. That's where Lou Smith came in, a detective with a reputation for finding truth in the quietest of places. Lou Smith wasn't flashy. He wasn't interested in headlines. He had one hell of a track record. And more importantly, he had a way of seeing what others missed. So when John Anderson took the oath of office, he made his first major move. And that was that he brought Lou Smith on and named him chief of detectives. Because when justice is long overdue, you don't need more noise. You need someone who knows how to listen. When a child goes missing, time becomes the enemy. Days pass, leads dry up, assumptions harden, and somewhere along the way, the victim stops being a person and becomes a case. But Heather Dawn Church was never just a case. She was a daughter, a big sister, a quiet presence in a chaotic world, the kind of child who paid attention to detail, to people, to the small things that most adults forget to notice. She was thoughtful, smart, artistic, reserved in a way that often hides great depth. And then she was gone. For 2 years, the silence surrounding Heather's disappearance echoed louder than any siren. Her name faded from the headlines. Her story slowed to a crawl. The justice system, tasked with finding out what happened, looked inward instead of outward, focused on their image instead of the evidence. But Heather mattered. She mattered so much that one man rerouted the course of his life just to fight for her. And because of that, everything changed. Heather's life didn't end in a single night. Her absence stretched across years. It reshaped careers. It shook the walls of the sheriff's office. And ultimately, it demanded better from the people who had failed her the first time. When we speak her name, we're not just remembering a young girl who was taken far too soon. We're remembering the shift that she caused, the silence she shattered, the promise that her life, even in loss, would not be forgotten. This is for Heather, still missed, still heard, still waiting to come home in every way that matters.
If you believe stories like Heather's deserve to be heard and that silence should never be the final chapter, take a moment to help us spread the word.
Click follow or subscribe on your podcast platform. Give us a thumbs up or 5 stars. And most importantly, share this episode, post it, text it, email it to someone who needs to hear it. You never know who might be listening or who might finally come forward.
And to support the work that we do here at Dark Dialogue, visit us at darkdialogue.com, where you'll find show notes, links to our Adopt a Victim program, ways to join the Dark Dialogue Collective, and how to help fund these investigations through Patreon or Ko-fi.
And if you have information about a case that we've covered or one that we need to, you can always reach us directly at info@darkdialogue.com. Your tips matter and your voice matters.
Follow us on social media for updates, behind-the-scenes insight, and upcoming cases. Every share, every comment, every download, it all helps keep these stories alive.
So next time we'll meet the man that John Anderson trusted to lead the charge, Lou Smith, the detective who let evidence, not ego, do the talking. And he wasn't just brought in to reopen Heather's case, he was brought in to finish it. So until then, keep the dialogue alive.